Hi, I'm Paul Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and today I'm joined by Leo Trautwein, Chief Commercial Officer of KnowU. Great to have you on the pod, Leo.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do at KnowU.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. So, born and raised in Brazil, but I've been living in the US for almost 2 decades now. I have a pretty diverse background in terms of industries and functions. I started first in strategy consulting, then I moved into consumer goods, then I moved into automotive, and for the last 4 years in the MedTech healthcare space, always focused on growth strategy and execution, commercial deployment, commercial strategies. Um, and I've been super happy to be at KnowU. We are a very small company. We're under 20 employees right now. We have been working on what I call transforming non-invasive medical diagnostics. So we have a platform that can non-invasively identify and measure analytes in your bloodstream or in your body. So the first application for this platform is blood glucose monitoring. So think of people that have diabetes and they are monitoring their blood glucose levels. Nowadays, the options that they have are either a finger stick that you have to get a drop of blood, or you can use a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitoring device. Some of the brands that are non on this space are Dexcom and Abbott and Medtronic. That's a little sensor that goes on your arm and has a microneedle and uses interstitial fluid as a proxy to measure blood glucose. What we're trying to do is to eliminate the need of needles. So it's a completely non-invasive. We emit a radio frequency signal into the body. We collect that radio frequency signal back, and by using a proxy on the energy that's absorbed by the body and our algorithm, we can estimate blood glucose levels. Interesting to keep in mind, as this is a platform, is not limited to blood glucose. We have done testing with other analytes such as ketones, metabolized drugs, oxygen, and so on. So we could be providing insight to the patient on other analytes as well. Our focus has been glucose, just to as we're a small business, we have to start with one and then start scaling up.
So this is basically your first application field, but the technology behind that can potentially be rolled out to several other diagnostic fields. And to make it
Not just sorry to interrupt. And not just for use on in the body, right? So you could use that sensor on the go, like people are using for blood glucose right now. You could use that sensor potentially in a hospital setting or point of care. So let's imagine pediatric office, a kid is arriving and needs to get their blood glucose level. That's one way to use the device as well. Kids are usually afraid of needles and getting blood and so on. So there's a major use there. It could be used in a surgery setup, so not just to measure glucose, but other analytes. And here we're talking really about medical, but there is also in vitro applications. So we have done a lot of testing on solutions with glucose, solutions with ketones, solutions with fructose, and so on, that we can identify the proper concentration. This can be expanded into making sure that the drug that someone's receiving in a hospital setting is the right concentration. This can even be expanded into other industries, food and beverage, oil and gas, and so on. Everything that there is a need to look into the right concentration, identify an analyte, and measure the concentration in that environment that analyte is. It's something that we can apply it for. I don't have it here, but I always say I have some sort of like a party trick that you can get our device, and you can put several cubes on top of the device that are a metal cube. So you can have a metal cube of copper, a metal cube of aluminum, and so on, several different metals. And if I put that cube on top of the device, it can tell me which material is that cube. So it just shows the power and the many applications that the technology has.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And in a nutshell, in the end, it makes lives for patients who have those conditions much more comfortable because they don't eventually have to use
Yeah.
needles every day anymore. And then especially in the pediatric setting for kids who might be afraid of needles, just having a less invasive method at hand can just simplify the therapeutic process and
Yeah,
perform on those
when
kids.
I'm typically asking like, why would someone, let's say there is a user that's already comfortable with a CGM, and they ask me like, why would a patient change? Why would they move from a CGM to your device? There is what you're saying. That's the lack of a needle in your body, right? But I think that the patients kind of got used to that. For me, the key drivers for them for a change are increased convenience and I would say cost associated with the product. Convenience, just imagine that you can be using our device on top of your arm and you want to go and take a shower, right? And you just don't want to use it, or you want to go to the pool and you don't want to use it for the next 30 minutes. You can just go and snap it off the case and put it on your countertop and go take your shower or go swim. And then when you're out of the pool or the shower, you can put it back on. That's something that the current CGMs, you cannot do it because once you insert in your arm, it will stay there either for 10 or 14 days, depending on the brand. So that's a good example. I also say maybe someone is going to a party, right? They're type 2 diabetes. They understand their glucose. They know that maybe for the next hour they feel comfortable not being monitored. So they decide to remove it. Because they don't want people seeing that they are wearing a sensor. So it adds a lot of convenience for the user. We're also targeting 3 potential locations in the body: top of the arm, forearm, and in the abdomen. So someone could go to a party and decide to move it from their arm to the abdomen, so no one sees. So it adds a lot of like convenience to their day-to-day, not just the lack of like that needle in the body. And then the second point about cost, it's really associated with the lack of disposables. A sensor nowadays, you buy, you use it 2 weeks, 10 or 14 days, depending on the brand, or 15 days now, depending on the brand, and then you have to toss it, and then you have to put another one. In that process, there is a lot of disposables, a lot of cost associated with them. Also, there is a lot of like plastic that you're using to insert the sensor and then to toss it. So there's an environmental aspect as well. Ours does not have a disposable, or if does, it's just an adhesive, depending on how the user wants to use it. There is an adhesive that they could have under the sensor, but it's marginal from a cost standpoint. So we really anticipate that our device will be capable of reducing cost to the patient significantly, probably by more than half, if not by a fivefold. And then when you can deliver that sort of like reduction in cost, it's not just about it's not about the reimbursement, but also access to the technology, right? So now you're talking about so many people that cannot afford a CGM nowadays, and they will be able to afford. And not just in the US, you can start thinking globally. You have so many emerging countries. Brazil, where I'm from, they have parts in Asia, Middle East, areas, Africa, areas that they just cannot afford a CGM because it can be very expensive. It can be in the thousands of dollars per year. An alternative like ours can increase access to blood glucose monitoring to that population.
Because in a practice setting, you could potentially use one device for multiple patients.
Correct. I think you just mentioned something that our founder says all the time. The other advantage is you may have one device for multiple people instead of like when you put a sensor, it's just for that person.
It's just stick to one person. Only one person can use it.
So you can, you could even say, what about situations that you have a large population that you just need to to check their blood glucose levels to identify if someone has a problem with their blood glucose. Our device could probably address that need. So you're spot on. It's not just for one. It's not just an individual thing. It can be for a practice or even a large group of people that don't need continuous monitoring. That could be using it more on a spot basis.
You mentioned the many different types of measurements the device could potentially in the future make. Would that then still be one device which would be capable of measuring several things, or would it be a different device for each type of measurement?
Yeah, maybe to address that, let me explain how the device works. So we use radio frequency dielectric spectroscopy. The concept here is there is an antenna array, and that antenna works. There are several antennas in there. There are 4 to be precise, and we use them in pairs. So one antenna is emitting a signal, and imagine that you have one antenna emitting a signal. It creates some sort of like an energy field, and another antenna is receiving that signal. So that signal goes in the body with our current operating parameters around half of an inch. So let's call it 12 to 13 millimeters. So you're getting a lot of data in that volume that's going inside the body. And what we're really measuring is like how much energy is being absorbed by the body. So we emit a signal, energy absorbs an amount. The difference is what we use to estimate the analyte that we're targeting. We work on based on a sweep. So we start at a point in the spectrum. So we start at 300 megahertz and we go all the way up to 4400 megahertz, and we can define the step in which we do that sweep. So we can start at 300, go to 301, go to 302, or we can do steps of 0.1 megahertz. We can define power settings, so how strong the signal is. We can define how much time it spends in each one of those sweeps. So imagine 300 emit a signal, collect the data, 301 emits a signal, collect another data point. So we create this curve that's called the RF signature. So you can imagine there is a curve, and that's the RF signature for a specific analyte and a specific concentration. So that's what allows us to target multiple analytes. And what you're going to see is that I wish I could show some of the graphs, maybe it'll be for another opportunity, but you may have a long curve for concentration. Let's use glucose, 100 milligrams per deciliter. And then if you change that concentration to 200, you're going to see the curve is going to be similar, but some portions of that curve, there will be a big difference on the shape of the curve. And those are the areas that we target, that we say like, okay, that's how I see different glucose levels. If we're targeting a different analyte, the areas of the curve where you're going to see those differences, they're not necessarily going to be the same as glucose. So there are many ways for us to build those RF signatures and target multiple analytes. But to your question, it is the same device, right? We're not changing the device
Understood.
to go to different analytes.
Understood. Analyzing the different signatures is then it's more software capability, which you can also later add to the same hardware device, which can be deployed in a patient population, but also with practitioners using it in their practices in hospitals.
Yeah. That's why we decided to also focus on one first, right? And once we learn very well to do that one, it's just a matter of like applying the same methodology to a different analyte. The same sort of like clinical development, clinical trials, and so on. Our focus has been glucose, but we have done thousands of hours with oxygen, because oxygen is testing with oxygen, just because oxygen is an easy one, right? To see your oxygen concentration level change, all you have to do is to hold your breath. So in a matter of a minute, I can see that happening. So we've done thousands of hours of oxygen. We've done tests with alcohol. So someone just takes shots of vodka, and you can start seeing the alcohol concentration changing in the bloodstream.
That sounds like a fun R&D session at No Labs.
Yeah, there were some, I would say, interesting days for sure.
Yeah.
You can do with ketones. We've done with metabolized drugs. Metabolized drugs, in this case, we used ibuprofen and Tylenol, so you can see the half-life of the drug. So there are many applications. It's just a matter of putting the effort to build the algorithm to each one of them.
You need to collect a lot of data across different levels of each concentration to basically calibrate your software and learn the different signatures of different substances in the body. Is there also like a patient-specific differential, or is the signature always quite different across patients, or do you have to calibrate to a certain patient to be accurate?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. To date, we're not using calibration in our device, so the answer would be no calibration. However, as we start to expand the number of people using it, we may start noticing some differences in the signal. And calibration could be something that will be needed. This is just not an affirmation, but just a sense. When I think of the regulatory path, our target has been the US market. This is, even though the intended use case already exists, devices for the same intended use case, the foundation technology is different. Something new that you still don't have thousands of data, thousands of people using it. So we have millions of data points, but we're not in the billions and hundreds of billions that some of the other ones already have. There is a chance that even from a regulatory standpoint, a calibration may be a way to just guarantee peace of mind, right? Okay, you use it now, do a calibration like a finger stick. And then every week or every 30 days, you do another finger stick just to make sure that it is within the parameters that we expect. If you go look in the past, most of the new devices in glucose, they always require the calibration when they came out for the first time. So that's what drives me to sense that could eventually happen. But the testing that we do so far in our R&D, it's all without calibration.
Okay, med device folks, picture this. What if you could open up a CRM today and it already contained information for every potential lead for you in the country? And you could narrow down those leads further by looking at billing, location, seniority, so much more. Alpha Sophia is the strategy tool that we wish we had had when we were commercializing a medical device in the US market. But there's nothing stopping you. So visit alphasophia.com and learn more.
Interesting. Speaking about the regulatory process, let's maybe move a little bit towards No Labs' current position on the path towards a mass adoption. Can you maybe share a little bit where you are in the regulatory process, how you're looking towards commercialization, at which stage you're currently in that dimension?
Yeah, let me even go a little bit on our past. So this idea started around 2018, and it was like a big board, right? You can imagine wires, sensors, kind of chaotic. The first 3 years, the company really focused on miniaturization of the technology. So coming from that big board to something that was small and people would use. That's what we called our Generation 0. It's a sensor. But that sensor was still wired to a computer to collect data. So we decided to create what we refer to the Generation 1, which is the benchtop device. It's the size of a computer mouse. You rest your arm on top of it to collect data. But now it has battery. It has wireless connectivity. So you could start just taking to different locations, but it's still not wearable. It's still a benchtop version. And then this year, it was end of February, beginning of March, we revealed the Gen 2, or we call it the KnowU. That is a wearable format of our technology, so you can wear on top of your arm, forearm, on the abdomen. It has a little case. You snap the sensor to that case. And the key differences here, there are some hardware adjustments. We put RF shielding, some things that improve the performance, but the main difference of the KnowU is that now it's wearable, so we can start taking it outside the lab environment. That's a controlled environment. People can start using in I'll call it real life application, right? So they go off their day, they're collecting data. Typically, we would use it with someone that already has a CGM or is collecting a reference data point, so we can, or a finger stick, so we can compare our data or our device to a reference data. But anyway, I would say this year for us, it's all about testing the KnowU. And there are two type of tests. There's this that I call the real life application, but we'll continue to do in-lab testing. The in-lab, because we need intravenous. That's the gold standard for the FDA. So we need intravenous blood to use as reference data. So there are these two sort of trials. I know my story is being a little bit long, but it's just to connect to where we are in the regulatory path. So this year is all about data collection, expanding diversity in our database. So different skin tones, different ethnicities, different BMIs, making sure that we have what we say extreme values in the blood glucose range. So a lot of data in the hypo, so 40 to 70 milligrams per deciliter. A lot of data on the hyper, above 350. These devices typically operate between 40 and 400. So a lot of our work for this year is data collection, so we can validate and further refine our algorithm. Once that's done, we can lock both hardware and algorithm and conduct official trials. And I say official trials because those would be the trials that we would use data to submit to the FDA. So regulatory path, this year is primarily data collection. For next year to lock, do trials. This is what I'm referring to, official trials, probably second half of next year for a submission to the FDA, either at the end of 2025 or sometime in 2026.
Understood. And for this initial data collection that is now going on, now starting, you're probably already reaching out to practitioners to cooperate with them to collect that initial data from patient cohorts in a research setting. How are you going about that? How are you reaching out to those potential early adopters and to those partners in that phase of your company?
Yeah, there are a few ways to go through it, to talk about it. One, we have our medical advisory board, in which we have people that are involved in research, diabetes. They're usually physicians that in academic center. So that's one way, through their network, find who would be interested in conducting trials. The second one, I attend a lot of conferences. There are two main conferences that we attend: ADA, which is the American Diabetes Association. That one is in June. Then we have ATTD in Europe. That's usually in the spring. There are a couple others that I attend, EASD, SPAD, and goes on. We attend this conference because it's a way to get engaged with the medical community, spread the word, and identify people that could help us with the research. But there are some tools and platforms that we can use to identify who are the key opinion leaders or that could help us in that process. I think you guys have a great platform, so we use that platform to understand who are the the key physicians doing research with glucose monitoring devices. There are features that allow us to identify those targets, and then it's a matter of like reaching out to them, introducing our product, our story, what's next, and start discussing a potential collaboration or research side. But you're spot on. It's not just one. We need several, right?
Yeah,
several people to engage. It's even though we're not selling the product, we still need several because the FDA just wants to see a very diverse data set, and we may get someone in Colorado, so we can test the device in a high altitude. We may get someone in Seattle where we're based. You get more humid environment and sea level. You may get someone in the Midwest, or you can go towards a location where you can get a more diverse ethnicity base. So it's not just one; it's multiple sites that we have to use to improve our algorithm.
Interesting. So you're using you're basically at the moment in the process of recruiting key opinion leaders and early adapters for collecting data, which you then use for the regulatory process going to the FDA eventually. Maybe taking one step back, you shared at the beginning that you've worked in other industries besides MedTech and healthcare before, like for example in the automotive industry. Are there any learnings where you say, okay, the MedTech industry is so different when it comes to commercialization, when it comes to initial business development initiatives compared to those other industries? Is it faster? Is it slower? Is it more traditional, more innovative? So what's your feeling when you compare those industries, having worked in several?
There are a few lessons or a few things that I learned since I moved to MedTech. First of all, we're managing people's lives, right? So that's very inspiring and very and it can motivate, it can drive you, right? So the work that we are doing in the labs can really change people's lives. You have a major impact, like I mentioned, pediatrics during this call. I have friends whose kids have diabetes, and they are diagnosed when they're 5, and that changes not just the kid's life, but the entire family's life. It's a difficult process. So everything that we can do to make it a little bit easier for them, it's very important. So that's one, is like how much you're really touching and changing their lives, right? It's very different if you're building consumer goods. You can still change their lives, but in my opinion, it's so much deeper, right? What we're doing right now. That was one. But then, because you're doing that, the level of rigor is the bars are much, much higher, right? You really, so I hear some people complaining about the regulatory process, and I think like, yes, it can be a little bit annoying, sometimes feels a little bit too much, but it is truly important when you're managing people's lives. Like it has to be a device that's safe and is providing accurate information, because they are going to be making decisions that are threatening their life, period. So the rigor or the bars are much higher, and that's why you have your QMS and your platform, your EQMS, and how to drive that process and how to document everything and how to think of risks and risk assessment. And so that was something that it was not as relevant when I was, for example, in consumer goods. There was like, you understand risks and you're going to put a product in front of consumer and mitigate those risks, but it was not at the same level of rigor. So that's something that's very different about MedTech, in my opinion, those two areas. what I believe that you bring, I was at consumer goods. I led, I would say, M&A strategy and e-commerce marketing. And then I was in the executive team at Rivian, the automotive pickup trucks, the electric pickup trucks. And it feels like, because it's consumer goods and then automotive, we focus more on the product experience than MedTech, right? Sometimes MedTech is really it's the technology comes first, and then you figure out how the product experience is going to be. So I think that bringing some of like how do you think of product experience first, and then how the technology can support that product experience. It's something that those industries, I have the impression that's more center to them. It's something that I believe that even Steve Jobs used to say, right? It's not the technology driving the product experience, it's the product experience that then drives the technology. I think that there is a little bit of applying that concept from that industries to MedTech. That sometimes it's not the center of the discussions.
Yeah, and you're totally right, of course, because everything is so patient outcome driven, and of course there needs to be a big focus on the technology, but on top of that, bring that product experience excellence into that industry as well. And I mean, as you were describing earlier, how you're constantly now changing the form factor of your product, starting with something which is rather big as a device, and then getting smaller and smaller, now ending up with a wearable device which people can wear on several parts of their body during the day. I mean, reflects your company's dedication towards also respecting or reflecting the product experience in your further development until market readiness.
Yeah, and even our current form factor, I still believe that there. It is I would say commercial form factor, meaning people could use it. It's the hardware; it's very mature, signal stable. It's a matter of on the algorithm right now. But when I use it, I also see like, hey, there are some little tweaks here that we could do that would make the product experience much better. Those are some of the things that we are considering as part of this process that we're going through. What are some of the tweaks that are not going to change the entire technology, but that could change how people will engage with that product, from how they snap on the case, the battery size, the profile, the shape of the product. There are some things that still can be tweaked and adjusted. One part that I did not mention, so in our audit, we've done 6 clinical studies to date, and the operating parameters that we have done so far, the most recent one was 30 participants, type 2 diabetes. We can collect a reading every 22 seconds. So that sweep that I explained in the beginning takes 22 seconds. At the end of the sweep, I can provide a reading. Once you start changing a little bit of that and say like, hey, you know what? I may not need to provide a new reading to the user every 22 seconds. I could provide one every 2 minutes or every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes. The current CGMs, some of them provide it every 5 minutes. They may be even getting data more frequently, but they providing every 5 minutes. So that if I do that, I could start thinking of like, okay, we do a sweep, we turn it off, right? And then after amount of time, we turn it on again, do another sweep. So the key impact here then is battery. So now I can start changing the battery size, making it much smaller. So all of that, going back to our point about product experience, can really impact the product experience. So should I keep the battery this size and make it last 10 days? Or should I be okay with 3 days battery, make something smaller? So all of that, those are questions from an experience standpoint that we're addressing right now.
Understood. If you would put yourself in the shoes of another MedTech company just getting started to looking at the US market and aiming to start there, are there any lessons you've learned over the course of the last years where you would say be alert to that, pay attention to that when planning, tackling that market, planning the commercialization process at some point, and planning to reach out to the early adopters in the field?
Well, again, you have to put in perspective that I did not have a MedTech background, right? So I've been in this space now 3.5 years. So this will be I'll complete 4 years soon. I had some connections with the healthcare space because my wife is a physician. So I would go to a lot of events on her field. She's a dermatologist. So I kind of understood how things worked. My main lesson is, because I didn't have that background before, but my main lesson was there's so many people, so many smart people in the healthcare, medtech space. You really need to network as much as you can. You can learn a lot. You don't need to be reinventing the wheel all the time. I'll give one very clear example right now. We're doing all this clinical or planning and starting and doing clinical trials. The protocols being used to test blood glucose monitoring devices, they exist for the last 30 years, right? They have been published in studies for the last 30 years. Every month there is a new study covering a new test, and it's a new protocol. So we should not try to reinvent. This is not, I would say, proprietary. This is just like how things should be done to collect data and to compare and to assess the performance of our device. This may be a simple example, but it's just an example of there's so much great knowledge out there. So networking, going to conferences, meeting people who are engaged in research, just sharing what you're doing, some of the challenges, they are typically very open to help, and you can learn a lot from people that have been doing it. It's a little bit different from, in my opinion, from my experience of consumer goods and automotive. That was a little bit more closed environment in information sharing. So I would just suggest connect a lot and don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, it's quite a friendly community where helping each other, making intros, sharing thoughts is also, to my experience, much more common. And what you're saying, I think, is totally right. In a nutshell, try only to reinvent what you really need to reinvent, and try to leverage existing knowledge, existing strategies, existing concepts that work as much as possible, so that you have, as a small company, which is always resource limited and capacity limited, the maximum focus on your core innovation piece, which in your company, of course, is the product, making it better every day and a better fit for the use cases, and then not trying to reinvent stuff in fields where it's not required.
Agree. No, I think that you said it in a much shorter and better way than I did, but that's the intent. I think there's a lot to learn from each other, and especially when you're talking with the medical community, they are doing this because they want to help people, right? They want to help the patients, so they are willing to help. So there are areas that's going to be your core, that you're going to invent something new, but there are areas that you may not need to.
Yeah, I fully agree. So to wrap things up, what's up next for KnowU Labs? So what's on your mind, on your team's mind for the next couple of months, years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not trying to be repetitive, but it's a lot of clinical trials, data collection, so we can lock hardware and algorithm and be in a position that we say, okay, we're ready to submit this to the FDA. There could be maybe I would say a new version, kind of based on the learnings that we get from this stage of all this data collection and algorithm development. But that's kind of on the R&D side, and then on an area that I spend a lot of time is really finding where are other applications for our technology, right? So I spend a lot of time meeting with other companies, meeting with people in the medical community that may wanna, I wanna test this for a different analyte, or another area that we can't make any commitments, but we keep trying is like to find collaboration opportunities that do not distract us from our core, but that would allow us to amplify the use of our technology. So I really hope that we can find additional use cases with a partner in the next months or year.
Yeah, really interesting, and I'm excited to hear about you hitting those milestones across the path. And it was really great having you on the pod today, Leo. And looking forward to have you back in some time when the company is on the next level, and you have more to share on that front.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope that in like 6 months, 12 months, I can be back here and share some great news.
And more fingers crossed. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
Simple question. Can you afford to have a rep in every county, or do you need to be hyper-targeted in your outreach? Do you need to know information about your targets going in to be successful, or do you have years and years before you want to close that deal? If you want to be focused, if you want to deliver fast, you should visit alphasophia.com and help your sales team out.